Tensions continue to rise between Germany and the European Commission, with Denmark and the Czech Republic now taking the German side to attack the European Union. Yeah, this whole saga between the European Court of Justice and the individual member states is getting quite crazy now, with Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, now attacking her own home country, Germany. Who knew? The whole thing started with the European Central Bank deciding to implement more quantitative easing to help the European economies. That's basically a modern version of printing money, as if that helps. And but then the German Constitutional Court has declared that you need to get Germany involved with this whole decision-making process, because why not? We're the boss. And also it goes against the German constitution. So we do have a new update for you guys on this from one of the journalists actually covering this whole thing. We have Peter Klepper tweeting that the German Constitutional Court judge Peter Huber has responded to the critics of that recent ruling, saying that Denmark and the Czech Republic's top courts have already declared that the European Court of Justice ruling to be ultra vires, which is beyond the powers, and even clearly in violation of the EU's competences, which the critics ignore. Now, it doesn't stop here, because he adds that Germany and most other EU member states have stopped short of agreeing with the ECJ on assuming that the EU law to be unconditionally superior to the national constitution. Interesting. So when the UK, for years and years, complained about this whole thing, that the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, cannot be superior in decision-making, legal decision-making, Europe as a whole, or the whole structure of the EU, kicked off, saying that, how dare you, the ECJ should be superior. Now that it's damaging their own side, especially Germany, now they're coming out to criticize the whole structure. So they've also said that not to set any conditions to the superiority of the EU law, they cannot actually be reconciled with the eternity clause in Germany's constitution, which rules out ending the democratic nature of the German state. Now, we know exactly what that means. They don't want to actually get into, that's what the court says. They don't want to create a United States of Europe, which again goes back, and it's against the whole agenda of Brussels. And I have a feeling that the German side are just slightly losing influence. That's why they're kicking off, because when they had the full power and the whole unity with France, then they weren't really complaining about other countries losing their sovereignty. Now it's actually going against their own values. Oh, somehow it's bad. The whole thing basically, if you go back to the article in Euronews, it talks about the whole thing that the European Court of Justice's spat with the German courts started. And then you had Guy Verhofstadt, a wonderful federalist MEP in Brussels, saying that if every constitutional court of every member state starts giving its own interpretation of what Europe can and cannot do, it's the beginning of the end. So he's now defending the whole federalism as a concept in Europe, because he does want to have a United States of Europe. He's always said that. He's the guy behind getting rid of these vetoes. He wants the European Council to just make decisions based on a majority rather than vetoing anything. And his comments, as this article mentioned, again goes back to the whole thing, because of the European Central Bank trying to kind of empower their own position. And the German judges have now given the ECB a 3-month deadline to produce a proper assessment to actually explain this whole 2 trillion euros bond buying program to keep Germany's central bank participating. Otherwise, they said, we're going to get the German central bank out of this whole thing, which again goes back against the whole European Central Bank system, and the ECJ will definitely punish Germany for this. And now, as we said, Ursula von der Leyen, who's now in charge of the Commission, and she's German, she's now said that the final word on EU law is always spoken in Luxembourg, nowhere else. The European Commission is even now talking about taking legal actions against the German government. They want to take Germany to court. We mentioned this last week, and by court, they're talking about the European Court of Justice. It's going to be incredibly biased, this whole thing. So, but they have to kind of do something about the economies anyway. So I don't think the German government or the German Constitutional Court is completely against the idea of quantitative easing. They just want to be involved, and they just want justification on how it's going to be implemented. Is it going to be actually working? Frankly, they only care about their own economies. As we said, this whole crisis that started 2-3 months ago in Europe, it's dismantling the idea of European federalism. Every country has gone their own way. They're closing their own borders. They're not really helping each other. The whole solidarity's gone out of the window. But again, we know that the commissioner for the economy commissioner, Paolo Gentiloni, has now said that definitely Brussels need to come up with some sort of sound policy to avoid these divisions, because at this point the whole continent are completely divided, not just over the global health crisis. It's actually economically and socially. They are now realizing that this whole fake unity and solidarity that they created decades ago is not actually real, and it can be achieved if it's simply based on trade and democracy. Let countries be sovereign, let countries have their democracy and have free trade. No one has any problem with free trade. We have a problem with actually trying to centralize every decision in Brussels. Now, this article about helping the economies now is talking about how this guy, Gentiloni, has now said that we are now in the deepest economic recession in our history in Europe, and we need a sound recovery plan to avoid risks of economic division. Now, the whole thing, the EU economy is now expected to shrink by 7.5% this year, a deeper fall than the 2009 financial crisis. He's also concerned that countries don't really have the same resources to recover from this shock, because Italy, Greece, Spain, and now Croatia are hit more than anywhere else, and they face their falls in economic output in excess of 9% in 2020. So that's actually even more than the average across Europe. While Germany's economy is set to contract by 6.5%. Not as bad, but it's still huge. Now, this whole thing is, most European countries are getting hit massively. The numbers came from about the UK situation. We're actually not that bad. We're about like 1.2 to 2% that we're going to get hit, or we have already been hit. It's just going to show at some point in the next couple of months. But Europe's economy is a lot worse than ours. Now, he's now requested that we need to get every prime minister and president around Europe to come and actually come up with a new centralized planning system. Yeah, because more centralization is going to help. No, for the love of God, stop doing this. They don't actually get this, because now that we have the Czech Republic and the Danish courts also going against the ECJ, and it's not the first time, because there are a number of countries who have decided to just not obey in terms of these regulations, but also other things too. You remember when this happened, when the EU court ruled against 3 of their own countries because they didn't take enough refugees. We had countries like Poland, Hungary, and again the Czech Republic, who had agreed to take and relocate 160,000 refugees, which is also a big problem, because this article is actually done by the BBC and they keep saying refugees. Not everybody was a refugee. 160,000, a big chunk of them were economic migrants. Stop calling them refugees. And so they didn't actually do it. The EU courts decided to punish them. So it's not the first time that this is happening. It's just getting magnified because of this whole situation. Now, we will definitely kind of keep you guys posted on this on a daily basis, because I think in the next week or so, we're going to see a proper response from the German side, as well as Ursula von der Leyen's gang. Now, in other news, we now have another division in the UK this time, with the opposition, the Labour Party, and the Socialists in general completely going crazy. The trade unions are now threatening to bring down the economy because they don't want their workers to go back to work, even if it's safe to do so, even if there's the actual infrastructure to do so. And then you have Labour MPs like Dawn Butler. In case you don't know Dawn Butler, we're going to show you the clip. She has now accused Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, of sending people out so that they could die. I mean, I don't even know how to respond to this, but Ian Dale actually had a good comeback. Let's watch this.
First of all, let me say that I think the Chancellor did the right thing yesterday in announcing an extension of the furlough scheme. It has to happen, otherwise we are just plummeting more people into poverty. I mean, the Prime Minister was reckless on Sunday in literally sending people to catch the virus, but the Chancellor's done the right thing.
Saying that Boris Johnson was sending people out to catch the virus. I mean, what on earth do you mean by that? Are you saying that he's deliberately wanting people to catch the virus? We've had cross-party support for the government's action on this. Keir Starmer has held the government to account, but done it in a cross-party way. And I think phrases like that actually are pretty disgraceful.
I think the Prime Minister's actions are pretty disgraceful. And yes, he is sending people out to catch the virus, sending people in my constituency in Brent out to catch the virus, when he's telling people to go to work without the proper infrastructure in place, when he's sending people to go to work with mixed messaging. That is irresponsible. And if you want to be disgusted at somebody, be disgusted at the Prime Minister.
Ian?
Well, he hasn't told people to go to work. He's asked people to go back to work in a safe way. And I don't know whether you think that we should lock down the whole economy for the rest of the year, because that's how long we're not going to have a vaccine until the end of the year. The only actual safe time for anybody to go out of their houses is if they've been vaccinated. That isn't available yet. So just let's cut this disgraceful language, shall we? Because no other politician is doing it.
Let me tell you this, Ian. I am the MP for Brent, and I have a higher death rate than a lot of other MPs. So excuse me if I am going to be passionate about this, because I want my constituents to survive this pandemic.
You know what I love about the left is that the moment they start losing the argument, they get emotional. And then they, go with their fake compassion, saying that, oh, it's because I care. It's because I care. I'm the only MP who cares about their constituents. All the MPs care. That's literally their job. Otherwise, they'll lose their job. She's an idiot. So for the 8 o'clock daily vlog that I have, we're going to have more updates for you guys about the whole socialist side and the trade unions going crazy and the left-wing media and journalists losing their mind. So make sure to tune in at 8 p.m. for the daily vlog. And obviously, we still have the 5:45 p.m. news show every day. So if you haven't joined us, make sure to subscribe and click on the notification bell next to it so you get notified. I'll see you guys at 8 p.m. with our daily vlog.